Launched in February 1976, the Holden LX Torana arrived as the penultimate model in the series, featuring a mild facelift of the previous LH. Best remembered for introducing a hatchback to the range, it would also sadly be the last Torana powered by a V8, and a car that was also notably refined with input from both Joe Szymanski and Leo Pranu. But what happens when you take a small, nimble LX Torana, stuff a thumping V8 into it, and then unleash it on the racetrack? Well, let's see. The LX Torana was available as a sedan in S Sports, SL Sports Luxury and SLR Sports Luxury Racing trim. But the new kid on the block, the hatchback, would only be available in SL Sports Luxury and SS Super Sports, notably because the S trim would be primarily destined for export markets. SS or Super Sport was yet another Americanism, as in the Chevrolet Chevelle SS454, and one that would only be used exclusively for the LX hatchback. Was a notable milestone. It was Australia's first widely available car to feature this popular European hatchback configuration, a style pioneered by Renault with the Renault 16 in 1965, which was also voted European Car of the Year in 1966. The new LX differed from the older LH in a number of ways. The Torana emblems were moved to the passenger side front apron plus boot lid, but note the SS lost the front emblem. The model, for instance SL, was relocated to just short of the headlights on the front fenders, but the SLR 5000 and SS switched these to plain fenders, and from inside, the models, particularly the performance variants, could be identified by their model designation. The decal was located on the dash centre. Engine callouts were now placed on the boot lid driver's side, and let's not forget the LX was now also given a much larger Holden badge, placed front and centre on the grille. As with the LH series, the S and SL models both used the two-spoke HJ style steering wheel, while the SS and SLR used a GTS three-spoke sports style. A new addition on all models was a control stalk, incorporating the indicators and both headlight, flash and dimmer functions, replacing the antiquated floor-mounted switch that had been a staple since the original 1948 Holden or FX. Gone were the square headlights, with all models now featuring 7-inch round headlights. Also, to the delight of road-going owners, the radio was now no longer an extra cost option. Under the bonnet, the 6-cylinder and V8 engines were still painted in Holden red or HK rocket red, while the imported Opel 1900s retained their black finish. The available engines were the L18 1900 Opel Camry head 4-cylinder with Solex 2-barrel downdraft carburettor, a compression ratio of 9:1 and power output of 102 horsepower or 76 kilowatts. The 6-cylinder Holden red engines were the LD1 2850 with Bendix Stromberg single downdraft carburettor, compression ratio of 9.4:1 and power output of 118 horsepower or 88 kilowatts. And the L20 3300 with Bendix Stromberg single barrel downdraft carburettor, compression ratio of 9.4:1 and power output 135 horsepower or 101 kilowatts. And finally the Holden V8s, beginning with the L32 4.2 litre or 253 cubic inch with twin barrel Bendix Stromberg carburettor, a compression ratio of 9:1, power output of 185 horsepower or 130 kilowatts. And finally the L31 5 litre or 308 cubic inch with 4-barrel Rochester quadrajet downdraft carburettor, compression ratio of 9.7:1 and power output 240 horsepower or 186 kilowatts. With these engines, the available transmissions were the MC6 4-speed Talkmaster or Filipino floor shift manual. This transmission was for the 1900 models only. The M15 3-speed column shift for 6 cylinders only. Then the good old M20 4-speed floor shift for all models except 5 litres, and the M21 4-speed close ratio floor shift manual for the 5 litres, and finally the M40 3-speed Trimatic floor or column shift automatic, optional for all models. The Banyo differential was still around and were available in various ratios from 278:1 all the way up to 390:1, although a limited slip diff was also optional. The SS, SL and SLR came standard with power-assisted front disc brakes, which were 254mm, approximately 10 inches, and the rear were 228mm, approximately 9 inches, drum brakes. This was standard practice for Australian cars of the era, even on performance models, to keep costs down and for simpler manufacturing. Then we have the trim levels, beginning with the sedan. First, the S, or entry-level model, available with Opel 1900 plus the 2850 and 3300 engines. Stopping was by drum brakes all round. It had specific wheel trims, plus a vertical bar grille for all 4-cylinder models, as in the LH series, with a horizontal, slatted type grille for all other models. Reflecting its entry-level status, it received a front bench seat and basic instrumentation. Then we come to the mid-range model, the SL, also available with the Opel 1900, the 2850 and the 3300, plus optional was a 4.2 litre V8, and again with vertical front bar grilles for the 4-cylinder models, with a horizontal, slatted type grille for all other models. The SL transmission options were a funny one. The 1900 came with the MC6 4-speed floor shift, while 6 cylinders got the M15 3-speed column change, and the 4.2 V8 had the M20 4-speed floor shift. Regardless of engine, the M40 Trimatic Auto was also an available option. Also included was rubber bumper bar strips and brighter trim surrounds for the tail lights. The interior was a step up from the S, with front bucket seats and carpeting throughout, a walnut grain look dash, and not forgetting a clock. The SL also received full instrumentation. Then the sportier SLR, standard with a 3300, although the 4.2 litre and 5 litre V8s were optional. Also standard was the M20 4-speed floor shift, and again the M40 Trimatic 3-speed auto was optional. To distinguish this model, the SLR received distinctive sports striping front and rear and rolled on SLR wheels, obviously. Now the SLR 5000, the top tier performance sedan, featuring the 5 litre V8 and what you get when you order a 5 litre with the SLR. The SLR 5000 now sported a black painted bonnet with black window surrounds and prominent blackout lettering across the rear spoiler and along the lower half of the doors. Similar in fact to the LH factory sport stripe option, but with different rear spoiler decals. The interior again included bucket seats, standard with the M21 4-speed close ratio. Both the SLR and SLR 5000 also gained sporty orange graphics with brushed silver dashboards. The introduction of the hatchback was undoubtedly the most significant change for the LX Torana, because without the distinctive hatchback, the LX's debut might have been considered one of the mildest facelifts ever. The roofline was dropped about 6 inches behind the thick B-pillar, creating a true fastback profile. The trade-off, unfortunately, was reduced rear headroom. The hatchback itself was a huge piece, supported by gas-filled struts. However, this elegant, almost straight roofline, sloping down to a subtle, cam-like kicked-up tail, while appearing spacious with the rear seats folded down, proved less practical than many expected due to its surprisingly shallow floor. This limited actual carrying capacity, further impacted by the neatly mounted spare wheel beneath the carpeted floor, despite several secret compartments. Cam-like or cam-tail describes a distinctive rear-end styling that was pioneered by German aerodynamicist Wunderbolt Kamm in the 1930s, a design where the rear of the car is abruptly cut off rather than tapering smoothly to a point. This chopped off tail often featured a slight and subtle upwards flick or spoiler element at the very end. Despite these practical limitations, the hatchback's undeniable appeal translated into strong initial sales. Its distinctive profile alone was often enough to convince buyers they just wanted one, as Holden recognised its significant potential to attract a young demographic. However, the S would go on to be produced in hatchback form, but solely for export. Its export presence was notable, particularly through CKD or completely knocked down kits, and CBU completely built up exports in New Zealand and various parts of Southeast Asia, often with specific engine configurations to suit their respective markets. Increasingly, the hatchbacks featured more refined interiors than their sedan counterparts, notably including a full-length centre console as standard on most variants, whereas it was an option on sedans. Despite their sporty looks and utility, durability, the hatchbacks were slightly heavier than their equivalent sedans. Their more complex rear structure, including the large opening and gas struts and bracing, typically added 20 to 40 kilograms or 45 to 90 pounds compared to a similarly equipped sedan. The front doors were 250mm longer than the sedans, yet unlike the Monaro, which famously offered pillarless or frameless window designs, the hatchback kept their window frames and so keeping their rigidity and integrity, which would be proven when they were raced. Only two hatchback variants were offered in Australia, the SL and SS. Reflecting its premium positioning, the hatchback wasn't available with either the entry-level S trim, which was for export only, the 3-speed manual gearbox, or the smaller 2850 6-cylinder. The SL came standard with a 3300 and optional was the 4.2 litre V8. It's worth noting that the SL hatchback rode on SLR wheels. Additionally, the design of the front bucket seats for these models was further enhanced, offering better support, and a centre console was also added and featuring a wood grain style dashboard. The Torana SS was a sporty version, essentially the equivalent of the SLR sedan. It featured SS emblems on its centre grille and at the rear on the driver's side of the valance panel between the number plate and tail lights. Available with the 3300 and optional with either the 4.2 litre or 5 litre V8s, and using the M20 4-speed for the 3300 or 4.2 litre V8 and the M21 4-speed for the 5 litre V8, riding on unique 5-slot design wheels with chrome outer rings and a pentagonal centre section specific to the SS. Inside, a refreshed cabin design saw instrument graphics adopt a modern orange hue, replacing the previous red-white scheme. Furthermore, the SS and SLR performance variants were visually distinguished by a silver finished dash, distinctive orange graphics, adding to their distinctive sporting aesthetic as compared to the standard models. However, unlike the SLR 5000, they omitted the car's overtly 1970s exterior graphics. V8 versions were subtly disguised by either 4.2 litre or 5 litre badging on the edge of the tailgate driver's side. Further distinguishing the SS models was a two-tone stripe running the length of the car, colour matched to complement the exterior, along with black rocker panels. Completing its unique look, the SS also featured body-coloured front and rear bumpers, enhanced with rubber inserts and vertical guards. For the SS and its sportier counterparts like the SLR, the 3-speed T-bar Trimatic automatic transmission became an available option, offering an alternative to the standard M21 4-speed. Mirroring the Chevrolet Nova hatch, and for a mere $65 Australian, the Torana hatchback could be purchased with a hatch hutch tent, a tent-like attachment for the open rear hatch, creating a small camping area. GM's proper term for this was a hatchback camper tent, and to highlight its corporate origins, this system was also available on the Pontiac Ventura, Oldsmobile Amiga and Buick Apollo. Despite offering panel van versatility in a daily driver and being supported by a slick marketing campaign, the hatch hutch never gained much interest. This was largely due to perceived lack of privacy, which prevented it from rivaling the Sandman's bedroom on wheels status among young drivers. Notable sources have indicated that the LX SLR 5000 and the 5 litre SS featured a front spoiler that was slightly smaller than the one used on the preceding LH SLR 5000. Also, both the SS hatchback and SLR sedan benefited from the inclusion of quartz halogen headlight inserts. Then, on July the 1st, 1976, came the real bad news. ADR 27A, or Australian Design Rule 27A, was officially introduced. It marked a pivotal moment in Australia's regulatory approach to vehicle emissions. This rule applied specifically to petrol-fueled vehicles and their exhaust emissions, representing a significant step toward curbing air pollution generated by these vehicles. Holden was significantly impacted by ADR 27A, and its compliance forced major modifications to their engine range, and in response to this, they fitted the XT4 engines. The term XT4 was sometimes used internally or informally to refer to these emissions-controlled versions. The Holden XT4 engines were a modified version of Holden's existing red engine range, which debuted with the HX series in July 1976. Internally designated XT4, these engines were re-engineered to comply with ADR 27A emission standards, which involved changes to components like camshafts, carburetors, distributors and adjustments to compression ratios, all of which led to a reduced power output. This also included the addition of ancillary equipment such as PCV or positive crankcase ventilation and EGR or exhaust gas recirculation valves, which also affected the power output. Positive crankcase ventilation is designed to remove blow-by gases, a mixture of unburnt fuel and combustion byproducts that leak past piston rings into the crankcase, drawing these harmful gases out, regulating their flow and redirecting them back into the engine's intake manifold to be reburned. Conversely, the exhaust gas recirculation valve reduces harmful nitrogen oxides by recirculating exhaust gases into the intake, which lowers combustion temperatures. July 1976 was a key date for vehicle power outputs due to the introduction of ADR 27A. This regulation mandated emission standards and also officially required power figures to be quoted in kilowatts as per the metric system, so moving away from horsepower for official engine ratings. This also meant engine power ratings transitioned from gross, measured on an engine dyno without accessories like alternators, to net with all accessories fitted. After ADR 27A, the effects this had on the Torana engine line were: the L18 Opel 1900 initially had 102 horsepower or 76 kilowatts, and after ADR 27 it was reduced to 72 kilowatts or 96 horsepower. The LD1 2850 started with 118 horsepower or 88 kilowatts and ended with 78 kilowatts or 105 horsepower. The LD20 3300 was 135 horsepower or 101 kilowatts. After ADR 27A, 88 kilowatts or 118 horsepower. The L32 started with 185 horsepower or 138 kilowatts, and after ADR 27A, 120 kilowatts or 160 horsepower. And finally, the L31 5 litre initially had 240 horsepower or 179 kilowatts, and after ADR 27A, 161 kilowatts or 215 horsepower. ADR 27A, which mandated the use of kilowatts for vehicle power outputs, officially came into effect for new vehicles from July 1st, 1976. But to avoid confusion, this date marked the definitive regulatory shift. However, the practical impact on advertised power figures, particularly for models like the Torana, saw a slight lag. This was particularly due to manufacturers having existing stock of engines or vehicles produced before July 1976 that still complied with the previous ADR 27 standards. Consequently, this transition was a gradual process rather than an instantaneous switch across all vehicles and promotional materials, and so would explain the variations in implementation dates. Unfortunately, it was the smaller, more efficient vehicles coming from Japan, even though they were producing smaller cars like their own Gemini. The losses incurred by the higher margin large car sales was making a real dent in the company finances across the board. Then in August 1976, GM North America launched the Pontiac Sunbird as Pontiac's new entry-level car. The same year, Holden adopted the Sunbird name for its mildly revised 4-cylinder LX Torana, which would replace the old Torana 1900s while retaining the same body and powertrain as its predecessor. It's important to note that despite sharing a name, the Pontiac and Holden Sunbirds had no commonality in terms of engineering, parts or platform. Consequently, all subsequent Torana badged cars would now be equipped with either the 6 or 8 cylinder engines. It would be in November 1976 that the Sunbird would replace the 4-cylinder LX Torana 1900, featuring a new interior and a recently developed Radial Tuned Suspension or RTS, which strangely enough would also be the first Holden vehicle to be fitted with RTS as opposed to any performance variants. The Holden Sunbird was traditionally chosen to debut Holden's groundbreaking Radial Tuned Suspension because by launching RTS on the new and more contemporary Sunbird, Holden aimed to highlight the significant improvements in everyday driving dynamics, differentiate the model and demonstrate that enhanced handling was a priority across its range, not just for high performance variants. This was crucial as the Torana 1900 had struggled against its Japanese rivals, but this alone wouldn't be enough to challenge the Japanese market, so the Holden design team also introduced a higher spec level featuring improved interior trim to complement the new name. The release of the Sunbird proved that Holden was listening to its buyers by giving them Japanese levels of value, so out went the bench seats, column changes and Spartan interiors. Otherwise, trim and grille aside, it resembled the unloved LX Torana 1900. Externally, the Sunbird differed from the Torana 1900 with new wheel covers and its distinctive Sunbird badging. An optional fashion pack was also available, which significantly enhanced the Sunbird's interior. This package introduced distinctive plaid cloth seat and matching door trim inserts and was available in 3 specific colours: black, buckskin, a light tan beige, and sienna, a reddish brown. These interior colour schemes were carefully coordinated with the available exterior colour paints to create a more integrated and refined appearance. The Sunbird would be available in sedan form with both S and SL trim, but only in SL trim for the hatchback, having had a production run of a mere 9 months. The LX Torana SL 1900 hatchback stands today as a very rare commodity amongst all Torana hatchbacks. What is RTS, or Radial Tuned Suspension? It was a comprehensive suspension redesign by Holden, specifically engineered to complement radial tyres. RTS effectively addressed and rectified the handling deficiencies prevalent in earlier Holden vehicles. Radial Tuned Suspension was yet another US name, reused down under. RTS was an evocative acronym pioneered by Pontiac circa 1973, or would mark for Holden a significant leap forward in suspension design. Peter Werritt famously criticised H.J. Holden's braking performance on his television programme Talk. However, it was the arrival of Joe Whitesell as Holden's new chief engineer in late 1975 that truly signalled a significant shift in the company's response to such engineering criticisms. Whitesell, who had previously worked at Opel, was highly receptive to feedback, particularly concerning vehicle dynamics. This new openness was exemplified by his positive response to racing driver Jim Sullivan's concerns about the LX Torana's handling, leading directly to the widespread implementation of radial tuned suspension and a concerted effort to improve braking across the range. Charles S. or Chuck Chapman, also from Opel, while testing these Torana fastbacks at the Langley Proving Ground, found their handling to be deplorable and so quickly initiated changes. Because of his experience there, he saw at Torana hatchback a potential for refinement and issued a directive along the lines of
sort out this goddamn front end so that the goddamn car will go around goddamn corners.
Peter Hannenberger, a German engineer seconded from Opel, played a key role in bringing a more sophisticated, European-influenced approach to suspension tuning that utterly transformed Holden's vehicle dynamics. Meanwhile, at Fisherman's Bend, a young engineer, Ray Borrett, was also playing a hands-on role in developing radial tuned suspension. Radial tuned suspension was fundamentally based on radial tyres, a major advancement over older designs. Their unique construction provided superior tread life, improved handling, and enhanced ride and comfort. These were achieved because engineers completely revised the suspension geometry, recalibrated springs and dampers. The LX Torana featured an independent front suspension with coil springs, wishbones, telescopic shock absorbers, and an anti-roll bar. At the rear, it utilised a live axle, springs, radius rods, telescopic shock absorbers, and an anti-roll bar. This, however, would be phase 1 of RTS, with phase 2 coming in with the UC Torana. Radial tuned suspension fundamentally transformed the car's handling and character, making 6-cylinder and V8 Toranas, particularly the hatchbacks, highly desirable almost overnight. Now back to racing for a minute. Following the L31 Torana's dominant performance at the 1976 Bathurst 1000, where they secured the top 7 places, a sense of complacency within Holden's management was perhaps inevitable heading into the 1977 racing season. This was despite Holden dealer team boss Harry Firth's clear awareness of Ford's impending factory assault, spearheaded by Alan Moffat, and his persistent pleas to Holden for urgent upgrades to the L34. Holden's misplaced confidence was abruptly shattered at the outset of the 1977 Australian touring car season. Alan Moffat, alongside his formidable new teammate, ex-HDT star Colin Bond, spearheaded a potent Ford offensive. This campaign was meticulously orchestrated by the renowned US race engineer and tuner Carroll Smith, whose strategic approach and technical prowess evoked memories of Ford's dominant GTHO era. The Holden L34s unfortunately proved to be no match for this comprehensively prepared challenge. The sudden and overwhelming dominance of Ford at the start of the 1977 touring car season provided a stark wake-up call to Holden. This shock immediately made an urgent upgrade to the L34 Torana their top priority. Holden then embarked on a frantic race against time, needing to rapidly test and produce a minimum of 250 road-registered vehicles for the LX, and called the Performance Vehicle Package, or better known as Option A9X. And that brings us to the end of part 1 of this 2-part episode exploring the legendary LX Torana. In part 2, I'll deep dive into the mighty A9X, its incredible development and the racing dominance that cemented it into iconic status.